Hello, Blackhawks fans. Welcome to a brand new edition and a brand new season of the Four Feathers podcast, season 6, episode 1. I am Ron Luce. I am joined here tonight by the boss man, Mr. Tony Marchese. We are here talking all things Blackhawks training camp. Happy Blackhawks training camp eve. But before we get into everything hockey, Tony, how are you, my friend?
Ron, it's great to be back on these airways. It's just about the end of baseball season for both of us, and it's gone swimmingly well over on Sox on Tap. I know you've fared a little better, but it's great to be back here talking Blackhawks hockey. We are just about to get this season underway. We've got some Tom Kurvers action to talk about. We've got a new captain to talk about. Tons of Hawks news. Ron, it's great to be back, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I am excuse me. I am also fired up to be back talking Blackhawks hockey. I am largely over the summer sports, just mentally, physically, emotionally. I'm done with it. I'm ready for the fall, specifically for Blackhawks action. So very excited to be here talking hockey with you. And just like our friend Daniel Barry's Sports Highlights here. Hey, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday to you as well. And if you want to join in on the conversation, just like Daniel Barry's Sports Highlights, you can do so. Chime in on X, on YouTube, on Facebook, and we can have your comments displayed during the show, just like our friend and buddy Ross Baran here, fellow On Tap Sports Net contributor. He says, just want to say I called it on Foligno last winter. Cheers, boys. We also have another comment here from Joe. Good to have you guys back. Excited for the season. Cold Steel on Ice is back. It sure as hell is. And we're fired up.
We love some Cold Steel on Ice around here. We love
that
some
we
Cold
do.
Steel on Ice.
Cold anything on ice is usually a good way to go if you are going by the Four Feathers bylaws. But Tony, speaking of Four Feathers bylaws, would it be appropriate if we didn't start season 6 episode 1 on the same date as season 5 episode 1 and leading off with the exact same topic? The Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase once again occurring this season. This time it was in St. Louis. The last couple of years it has largely been up in Minnesota. This time it did involve the Wild as well, but also the St. Louis Blues. The Hawks played each of those teams once in the tournament, falling to the Blues on Friday, defeating the Wild on Saturday. Tony, just quickly here, before we get into some of the details, your thoughts on the 2-game showcase just this past weekend.
So I got to take in Friday's loss. I didn't get to see the victory there on Saturday. I was at the ballpark. So obviously that was the one that I probably would have enjoyed a little bit more. Just a couple of things right off the top here. I thought last year it was a little bit more accessible for fans to watch it, with it being on YouTube versus just streamed right off of the website. It made it a little clunky to try and get things casted and all over the place. But, dual screen action out there in the garage on Friday night had the Hawks and the baseball games on, which was awesome. I thought out of everything, Slaggert looked really good out there on Friday. It's obviously good to see Frank Nazar. I know you're going to want to talk about Spellacy here in a second, but overall, man, it was just the first taste of hockey. I don't think it had as much appeal as last year's Tom Kurvers when you had Connor Bedard putting on a show for you. It would have been nice to see Artem Levshunov appear in a Blackhawks jersey for the first time. Obviously, that did not take place. And then you had a couple of other guys from this most recent draft that you wanted to get a little bit of a feel for their game who were unable to play, Merrick Vernacker being the one that I wanted to see. But overall, it's just good to see red sweaters back out there on the ice and some Blackhawks hockey. It was okay, viewing wise. I thought last year's presentation was a little bit better, and it also had Connor Bedard. But what are your thoughts on this, man? I thought it was just enjoyable. It was good to have hockey back.
It was good to have hockey back. I think this year's Prospect Showcase, like you said, right? Last year's was so hyped up because it was the Connor Bedard show. And obviously he performed admirably in the spotlight in his first showcase, really in his first any kind of action as a Blackhawks player. Sure did. So, you had that a little bit last year. This year, it was a little more focused on, some of these other guys that, although they might not be the names that get everybody all warm and fuzzy are very well guys that could be meaningful contributors to a future playoff bound, we'll say, Blackhawks team. And the reason I thought that was interesting, because a lot of these guys are also going to be in Rockford this season. And I kind of want to bring up Rockford maybe a little bit more later in the show. But all in all, I agreed with you. Would have been nice to see Levshinov. Would have been nice to see Van Acker. Unfortunately, both players injured. Levshinov's not super serious, but of course they weren't going to risk anything. He should be back. They expect probably in about the next week. As for Van Acker, he'll have a late start to his season because of the offseason shoulder injury that he is nursing his way back from. But as you mentioned, Landon Slaggert, Frank Nazar, right? The two players that have NHL experience, expected those guys to dominate in the tournament. They surely did. They stood out. And, again, playing on that top line as well in the showcase, they were the top line, and for good reason. In addition to that, you mentioned Spellacy. I mean, talk about a guy who big, fast. He showed off the nice shot against St. Louis with that goal. He's a guy that I think a lot of people will be excited about. Unfortunately, he will be back in the OHL, as will many of the players that they drafted in this most recent draft class, either the OHL or at the college ranks for the fall kickoff in the season. But 2 goals from Nazar overall in the tournament, a number of points from guys like Slaggert, as well as Martin Misiak had a nice assist to Nazar in the second game on the sweet sauce pass that really generated a lot of buzz. So it was just good to see a lot of these guys making an impact. And I think there was a couple of names that people didn't necessarily have glaring, like, oh, this guy did really well, because they weren't as active maybe on the score sheet, or at least in terms of lighting the lamp, that is. Paul Ledwinski is a player I'm very excited to kind of keep an eye on this year. He was a second-round pick in the Kyle Davidson era. Now, he will be with the Rockford Ice Hogs this season. He got a cup of coffee with them at the end of last year, but officially signed his contract, and he's good to go. He'll be age 20 this year. So as the CHL-NHL transfer agreement works, he is eligible to play in Rockford. So, but he was a guy making plays all over the ice. Setting up a lot of plays, I think, is the most important part. He might not necessarily have been responsible for the goal, but largely responsible for getting in there and making something happen. And I think that's going to be a reason he's going to be an intriguing player, right? Because we know what Luke Richardson's looking for out of these Blackhawks forwards, now and down the road. It's balls to the walls, be good on the forecheck, make shit happen, and disrupt the play. And we saw a lot of that from a guy like Ledwinski here in this tournament. So, again, keeping it very high level, but overall, again, this is mostly the crop of guys that people are going to be really keeping an eye on over the course of the season. And it was good, like you said, Tone, to see them in the Indian head sweater before we get kicked off with training camp activities. Tony, speaking of training camp, that opens tomorrow. We are recording here on a Wednesday night, so happy Training Camp Eve when a large amount of people are listening to this. If you are tuning in with us via podcast, it is training camp day. Training camp opens on Thursday. As we mentioned, the Levshinov injury, probably one of the bigger notes going into training camp because of the foot. And the roster was announced, a number of, obviously, the guys that we expect to be on the NHL roster, as well as a number of AHL and prospect level players that will be participating in the tournament. And Tony, what is the top storyline that you're entering training camp really watching here? Because I think there's going to be more storylines than people might realize right now. And I want to get your take on what's the one that you are hyper-focused on as activities open on Thursday.
I hate to steal the bullet because you put the rundown together here today, but this has been my thought going into training camp is who winds up on the Bedard line. I think that is the top storyline. We talked about this a couple of times over the summer as the acquisitions sort of came in back there in July. You've got the option of Teuvo Teravainen to play up there. You've got the option of Tyler Bertuzzi. Does Taylor Hall come back and wind up on that top line? You had all of that chemistry with Phil Kurashev last season. Is that still a thing? So those are the types of decisions and things that Luke Richardson's going to need to feel out here at training camp very early. And I'm assuming that we're going to see a little bit of some plug and play throughout the training camp preseason games. But I mean, your guess is sort of as good as mine right now is who's going to wind up exactly on that line on opening night. The second thing that sort of is, and this is sort of under the radar, Ron. I know Laurent Brossoit is in camp, but he is injured as well. I know you brought up Artem Levshinov. So, is Arvid Soderblom going to take a little bit of a step forward throughout the preseason? Does he, how long is he going to be in Chicago for? There's a couple other goalies who are going to be on the training camp roster, Drew Commesso being one of them. But all indications are that, potentially you might see Arvid Soderblom back in camp. I know this isn't a huge storyline for the sake of the season, but, you might have to witness a few Arvid Soderblom games here to start the year, depending on how long it's going to take Laurent Brossoit to get back into game shape, Ron. So I'll be keeping an eye on that, but that means all eyes are now on Peter Mrazek to have as good, if not better, of a start to this season as he was playing last year, because your top acquisition at goaltender is probably not going to be out there on night one, Ron. So those are my storylines that I'm looking at. How about you?
Yeah, well put. I think the goaltending one is certainly an interesting one. Obviously, I think we know, right, like you said, who the players, the Jimmies and Joes, are going to be in net while Brossoit is healing. I think the good news there for the Blackhawks is Brossoit should return to doing some kind of activity sooner rather than later. He's just going to get a little bit of a late start in camp, so you could probably factor in maybe a 2 weeks kind of period once the season starts before we really start to see Brossoit. I think there's a chance we see him by the end of October, maybe around Halloween. I think would be kind of the pinpoint that I'm going to put on when we see Laurent Brossoit finally make his debut in net for the Blackhawks. Tony, I think for me, the largest storyline, there's two of them, and it's kind of two-pronged as well. The first one being the blue line. And I mean that for one strict reason. There's pretty much 5 players that we know are for sure going to be on the blue line this season.
And Kevin Korchinski's one of them.
I don't know if he's one of them.
I know.
That's where
we're going with this.
This is where I'm going with this. So we already know who the top pairing is going to be. Obviously, it's going to be Alex Vlasic, and it is going to be Seth Jones. We know the second pairing is probably going to be Alec Martinez and TJ Brody, kind of as that shutdown block shot type line, because that's what they're going to be out there to do. The third pairing is going to be Connor Murphy. But who is going to be his running mate on the left side? Is it going to be a Kevin Korchinski? Is he going to earn the job right out of camp? Or do one of these other young defensemen who they've been, grooming and bringing along at the Rockford level potentially steal that job?
Who did you have on that second line there, Ron? Did you list Alec Martinez on the second line? Because Alec Martinez could be your third line guy. He
could be, but they're probably going to play him and Brody together. Well, too late for that, buddy. He's a little $4 million already. He's there for sure. But I think what needs to be kept in mind is there are other guys who very well could steal that spot. Wyatt Kaiser, I think, is a name that we'll be keeping an eye on. He certainly could be in conversation for that final defenseman spot on an every night basis, I would say, right? I think a guy like an Isaac Phillips could certainly be on the roster, but be more of that seventh defenseman, especially early on. There's a chance that Ethan Del Mastro, who we got to see a little bit at the end of last year, was an AHL All-Star with Rockford. He certainly looked really good, especially with Connor Murphy. So that maybe there's a chance that he wins the job out of camp. I am just prepping people mentally for if Korchinski goes to Rockford, so people don't get their panties in a bunch, and you being one of them, my friend, because I agree.
Yes, I think me more than it was for the listeners.
I think he absolutely needs every opportunity to earn the job. Like, it's his to lose. I fully agree with that. He was there last year. He played well, given he being a 19-year-old defenseman at the NHL level on largely a pretty bad Blackhawks team. He needs to still go out there and prove, though, that he's better than an Ethan Del Mastro, a Wyatt Kaiser, and all these other guys to truly get that playing time. There's also the chance, Tone, that they could look at this and say, hey, we feel confident that a Wyatt Kaiser has reached his ceiling in his development. Maybe he is nothing more than a third pairing, a very high-end third pairing defenseman. By putting Korchinski in Rockford, he's going to play number one top pair minutes alongside Artem Levshinov. And that could be the greatest thing for both of their developments, given that they're young and, they're certainly cornerstones of the future of this team. So I think that's the one I'm looking at the most. it kind of goes into my two-pronged approach because I think the borderline young players is the other topic per se or storyline that I'm watching. The guys like Frank Nazar, Landon Slaggert, a lot of these guys that we did see last season at the NHL level, who very well are probably, unless they absolutely ball out in the preseason and show otherwise, going to start the season in Rockford. Granted, playing very big minutes in Rockford, but still potentially going to start the season in Rockford. So that's what I'm watching because I'm really intrigued. I think Slaggert's pretty much guaranteed to end up in Rockford right out the jump. I think there is a world where they're going to really give Frank Nazar every opportunity to earn a spot right out of camp. And they need to see it from him. And if it's not there, hey, bud, no problem. Go play 20 minutes a night down in Rockford and we'll see you in 3 months. I think that's what my intrigue and where my storyline hunting goes to when I look at this roster heading into training.
Do you believe that Lukas Reichel needs to have a really good camp?
I think he does.
Or do you think that there's a chance that he could wind back up in Rockford out of the game?
I don't think he's going to end up in Rockford because, mind you, now he has to go through waivers to go to Rockford. And there are probably quite a few teams in the league for 1.2 for the next 2 years that would take a guy with Lukas Reichel's upside. I think the key for Reichel, though, with having a good preseason, and more just for his confidence, because I think last season, just the up and down nature of the year, starting as the second line center, it not working out, being demoted all the way down to the fourth line and even healthy scratch at times, going to Rockford, coming back. I think as long as he comes out and says, hey, look, maybe I am this season a third line winger, but I'm a good third line winger and I'm confident in my ability this season. I think that's why a guy like Lukas Reichel needs to come out and have a big camp.
No, but if a guy like Frank Nazar has a better camp than Reichel, do you start Nazar down in Rockford just for the sake of the options? Because you're the GM, you're GM Ron. I'm just asking, do you think it's a lock that Lukas Reichel makes this team already?
I think it has to be just because of the nature of the contract. Like he would need to come out and have a pitiful camp to end up and start the year in Rockford. Like that's just the nature of the beast, in my opinion. I think he would have to come out and just look horrendous and lost completely. I think if he comes out,
but
no, I don't think so either. So I think because of the nature of his contract, I think he's more or less guaranteed a roster spot. That's the one thing I will say about this training camp is like because of the additions that they made in free agency and via trade, there's not a lot of space for these young guys to make it, even if they do have really good camps. But I think at the end of the day, if you ask Kyle Davidson what he would prefer, I think he wants all these guys to have good camps. I think he wants Rockford to be leading the league in the AHL in standings points by December because all these kids are just on fire to begin the season. Like that's the best case scenario because when injuries inevitably happen, we saw a slew of them a season ago, and players that are on this roster that have a tendency of getting hurt, Connor Murphy, we saw Taylor Hall have obviously the major injury, guys like Andreas Athanasiou, who missed a ton of time last season. You know, as soon as one of those guys gets hurt, to me, that's immediately, okay, who's the guy that's playing the best in Rockford right now and who's ready to come up and make a difference?
Yeah, that's fair. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with Rockford being stacked this year.
No, not at all.
There's nothing wrong with it. I've actually backed down on my Kevin Korchinski needs to make the team out of camp argument. I've softened my stance a little bit on that, Ron, because there isn't a lot of room on this roster. And, you know, I do like the thought of Kevin Korchinski playing top pair minutes versus bottom two, you know, minutes in the NHL this season. There's a lot of room for growth for a lot of these guys. And the additions I think that Kyle Davidson made for this season, it's going to be twofold. One, it allows some developmental time. Two, it's going to make the product better to watch on the ice at the NHL level. So it's going to be interesting to see how training camp shakes out. But I have a feeling there might be a couple of guys that people, and Nazar is probably one of them, Slaggert's probably another, that you saw, as you mentioned, that last year were up at the NHL level. They're just no longer here at the NHL level when things start. So I want them to have good camps just like you do. And I'm sure Kyle Davidson wants that to happen as well. But there's only a limited amount of space. Let's just hope that we get through training camp healthy. I think that's the last thing that we would want is a guy getting a spot because someone else is at the top of this list is injured and banged up to start up the year. I'm already seeing enough little indicates injury asterisks next to enough names on this list. Let's get through camp healthy this year, Ron. What do you say?
It'd be good. And one more note on the Rockford thing, because earlier today I revisited an old Scott Powers article from the middle of July. And it was very focused on Rockford and kind of what Rockford's going to be this year. And there was a quote in there that stuck out from Kyle Davidson, notably that he said, Rockford is probably our greatest developmental asset because now that the Blackhawks own the Ice Hogs and they've invested money in the stadium and the resources, like that's the best place that these guys can be to develop. That's why Artem Levshinov's going there and not going back to Michigan State this season. That's why a guy like Kevin Korchinski could very well be there. Same goes for guys like Nazar and Ledwinski and Slaggert, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But on top of that, I think what is so fascinating about that is the last time that Rockford was absolutely loaded with first, second, and third round draft picks, like it largely will be this season and probably for the next like 2 or 3 years. The last time that happened, Tony, was back in 2008 with the likes of names like Cam Barker, Dustin Byfuglien, Brian Bickle, Dave Boland. Most of those guys end up going on to being huge pieces of those Stanley Cup runs. I think that was the thing that stood out the most. It's funny because the 2 first-round picks that were listed on that Rockford team, Cam Barker and Jack Skilley, largely were busts in terms of their NHL career. But it was the guys in the second and third round, the Bickles, the Bolands, the Byfugliens, the Browers of the world, the Versteegs of the world, who came up and were notable contributors on at least one, if not multiple, of those Stanley Cup teams. That's why Rockford's going to be fun this year. And I implore anybody that if you love the sport,
are you heading out to Rockford?
I very well might try to get out there for at least 1 or 2 games. And an easy way to do it, keep an eye on the Wolves schedule. Rockford comes to the Wolves at least 2 or 3 times, and they're usually on weekends. Go grab a ticket, go see a game. They're going to be fun. And you're going to be watching the future of the Chicago Blackhawks. Like most of the guys that are playing down there this year are going to be expected to start taking on roles when the likes of, Pat Maroon and Craig Smith move on, or the Nick Folignos of the world. Like when these guys all move on and these contracts start to expire, these guys are going to be expected to step up and step in largely, and then that way your free agent resource is not plugging holes. It's going after that big additional star that you can pair with a Connor Bedard. So I'm very excited to what Rockford brings and what it means for this team this year. And again, like you said, because of the investment in the NHL level and the product going to be better on the ice there, it allows not only the product on the ice to be better at the AHL level, but the development that's going to occur. And again, we've seen that with Alex Vlasic. We saw it largely with a guy like Ethan Del Nastro last season. They're going to have guys that take huge leaps forward this year because of being in Rockford rather than scrapping for bottom tier minutes like you alluded to with Korchinski at the NHL level. So super excited about that and intrigued to see where that goes. But Tony, one of the names that I just mentioned, right, that in a few years will be moving on, but is under contract for the next 2 seasons, was officially named the captain of the Blackhawks, 35th captain in the team's history, de facto, no more. Nick Foligno now wearing the C here in Chicago. I know you're fired up about it, Tony. Lay it out for us. How do you feel about the Blackhawks 35th captain?
I love this move, and I think that comes as no surprise to anybody who's listening to this show. This does one thing right off the bat heading into this season. It was a storyline all last year. Are they going to give Connor Bedard the C? And by all means, I believe that Connor Bedard could be the 36th captain of the Chicago Blackhawks in a couple of years, but let's hold our horses. He is not Jonathan Taves at this point, right? He's Connor Bedard. So we have to stop making the ultimate assumption that Connor Bedard's trajectories are going to be all the same trajectories that we saw for any of the other stars that have come through this organization. Kyle Davidson, Luke Richardson evaluated what Nick Foligno brought to the table last year, and he was Connor Bedard's leader And you saw it on the bench, on the ice, at time and time again in post-game press conferences. He was the leader of this team last season. That is sort of, we called him de facto for that reason, right? So putting the C on Nick Foligno's chest for this year, it allows this storyline that started to build up over the summer. And there was a lot of outlets, including the NHL themselves, sort of pumping air into this. Is Connor Bedard going to get the C this year? I believe this came probably around August. I think I wrote something on this topic over at ontapsportsnet.com, and I alluded to the one option of you can
Shameless
potentially
plug.
What was that? Shameless plug. Yes.
Shameless plug.
I alluded to the fact that you can give the C to Nick Foligno until his contract runs out, and it's 2 years, and then allow that growth to happen underneath Nick Foligno and sort of pass this torch on to Connor Bedard. Or you never know what things are going to look like. I think we all assume it's going to be Connor Bedard because he is the most talented one. But as you saw with Patrick Kane before on the Chicago Blackhawks, it's not always the most talented one that is the loudest voice in the locker room. So far, I don't know about you, Ron, I haven't seen sort of the outspokenness from Connor Bedard yet, and that's okay. It can come. He was an 18-year-old in the league for most of the time last year. He's playing with guys in their mid to late 20s into their early 30s. It's a large adjustment coming straight out of high school into the NHL and being a leader of men. That's a difficult task. A lot of people forget that there was time there for Jonathan Taves in University of North Dakota, where he was a captain. I know Connor Bedard was captains of different teams throughout his career so far. This is the NHL. Nick Foligno has been in the captaincy role before. He obviously brought all those same leadership skills and qualities to this locker room last season enough to earn this. I think it was a great move, and we can sort of hush this and allow Connor Bedard to focus on becoming the best NHL player before he has to be a leader of these guys. And as we've also alluded to on the show, Ron, you talk about Rockford. Now, if Bedard was grooming in Rockford, I'm sure he would probably be a pick for captain down there. But most of the guys that he's going to be with in 2 years, once some of these contracts expire, aren't even on this team yet. The guys that he's going to be leading are probably a year to 2 years away, including like Artem Levshinov. Those are the types of guys who are going to come up into the system in a year or two that Connor Bedard's actually going to lead. Right now, he's still firmly in the learning process of his NHL career. That's my belief. I think it's going to be a better year, but I really love the move of Foligno at captain.
Yeah, and I do as well. Again, it feels like a no-brainer, right? Like for all the reasons you said. He's already done it. He showed that he was the guy last season. There's a reason he was the next man in line to be the captain. And we all knew why there was no captain last season. They made it well known that, it was to give grace and to give honor to Jonathan Taves and what he did for the organization. But the time is now, and you tend to see the teams that don't name a captain just historically in the NHL that are kind of going through a rebuild. They tend to struggle a lot more, it almost feels like. Once you have that appointed leader, and I know they have the leadership room, and this is a good time to interject that your A's are still going to be the two other A's that they were last season. It will be Seth Jones and it will be Connor Murphy serving alongside of Nick Foligno as your captaincy group. But having that guy wearing the C makes a difference, right? Like that's the guy now for sure that, when he's on the ice and there's a penalty being discussed, he's going to be the first guy to skate over now. It's not a who's who of is it going to be Murph, is it going to be Jones, or is it going to be Foligno now moving forward? So agree with you. Well put, my friend. I have nothing else to add. But a worthy addition to Nick Foligno's jersey is the C this season. And it'll be cool to see that skating out around the ice come October 17th. When they take on the Sharks to open.
You going to pick up a Foligno captain jersey?
I might. I thought about that today, actually. That crossed my mind. I was like, ooh, I almost pulled the trigger on a Foligno last year. Now I feel like they're going to be selling them with the C on them. It feels like a worthy addition to the wardrobe if we can swing.
Are they
it.
going to have the Circa logos on the jerseys this year in the
That's
the
a good
Blackhawks
question.
store? I'm curious.
That's a good question. They might. They very well might. They very well might. That might be the new addition to the jerseys that they sell. But we will certainly see from there, Tone. So we have the captain. We also have more information about the Chicago Blackhawks. The broadcast schedule is out. Our third member of our panel, Mr. Johnny Nani, did a fabulous job writing up all the news and information over the last couple of days. Notably, the Blackhawks will be on the newly formed CHSN, which debuts October 1st here in the Chicagoland market, as well as pretty much in the Great Lakes region. If you look at where they're trying to get coverage to, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and I believe Indiana are all going to be a part of the market, for lack of a better term, for CHSN. But that they will be on CHSN 69 times, a very nice amount of games on CHSN this season. They do have 13 national games. Those are split between TNT and the host of ESPN networks, which includes ABC. I know there is one for sure that they are on ABC, not on ESPN. In addition to that, they have 2 games where it is just the ESPN Hulu exclusive during the season. So just two of those that need to get dealt with. And as Johnny Nani always says, what you do, you just sync it up to the radio broadcast and you get to listen to John and Troy, who are back and still on WGN radio, covering the Chicago Blackhawks and bringing you an incredible broadcast product on 720 here in the Chicagoland area. Tony, we haven't really gotten a huge chance to talk much about CHSN and what that's going to mean for the Chicagoland market, what that's going to mean for our Blackhawks, and even what it's going to mean for the team that shares the United Center of the Chicago Bulls and the other Reinsdorf-owned franchise in the Chicago White Sox. What do you think? What are your thoughts on the newly formed CHSN and what's to come here come October 1 when it debuts?
I mean, the first question is, am I going to be able to get this on my cable package? I'm an Xfinity subscriber. I don't know about you. I know that you just moved, so I'm not sure which what you get your TV from.
Also Xfinity.
Yeah, so that's the biggest question. A lot of people are Xfinity. There's a lot of people who use YouTube TV, Fubo, all these other things. The only way that I know right now that you'll be able to get CHSN is to head down to your local hardware store and buy yourself an antenna. Ron, I think that's kind of old school, I guess you would say. I know that that's the free option, but I don't know if you're able to rewind an antenna TV, man. Like, it's just not going to have all the same stuff. Can you record the game? Are there going to be highlights available? Is there a website? They haven't really announced anything.
There is a website.
There is a website. Okay.
There is a website.
They haven't really announced anything to the masses outside of, obviously we'll get Pat Boyle, Kaylee Chelios, and Tony Granato back in the pre and post role. But overall, they just need to release what the distribution is going to be on. We had some comments after Johnny did release the TV schedule today from people on X asking, if they're going to be able to get it, what channel it's going to be on. We don't have that information yet. That's a problem. We are not so far away from the first broadcasted game. I believe there is
October 1st.
October 1st. I thought that we were doing a couple on the first preseason game on CHSN October 1st. Okay. Because that's the launch day. That puts us what? When people are listening to this tomorrow, it'll be the 19th. We're about 11, 12 days away. We're under the 2-week mark. The last I see about CHSN is that they were close to their first distribution deal with DirecTV. That was via the Chicago Sun-Times. That came out a week ago. We haven't heard anything since. That doesn't scream to me that we're going to have Chicago Blackhawks hockey on all of the TVs in our house, day one, Ron. I have a feeling that there's going to be a gap period where I'm going to be moving an antenna around, plugging it into multiple TVs, depending on which TV I want to watch the Chicago Blackhawks on in my house. I don't know about you. I don't have a bunch of antennas. Do I need to go buy 5? Someone help me here, because this is kind of infuriating at this point, Ron. I don't know. I don't know what to do. Do I go and buy 5 or 6 antennas and then wait, or what's your plan, man? I mean, how are you holding up?
Well, as the Chicago Cubs fan, we went through this years back in 2020 with Marquee Sports Network. There was a lot of question, concern about where it was going to be available and who was going to be able to pull it off. The reason that the first one that truly got done was Xfinity is because Xfinity handles, I think it's like over 70% of the Chicagoland market is under Xfinity. So they were able to execute it the day before the launch of Marquee Sports Network, and it was available day one on any Xfinity device, we'll call it. I fully expect them to get it done with Xfinity, even if it is on the eve of the debut of the station on October 1st. And I think the others will quickly follow suit. I think what they at least have as a saving grace is the fact that October 8th is the first regular season game. So that gives them a week after the launch date officially of CHSN to figure everything out and get things underway. Quickly, Tone, just a couple of comments. Sonny said, "Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening to you, my friend." But Scott noted that Stream East is what he uses. He pays for nothing. So that might be the move if you have to. But I'm confident they'll get something done, because that's just bad business if they don't. And I think they understand what the implications are of that. I think they'll get something done. I think some of the streaming services, maybe the YouTube TVs, the Hulus of the world, might need to wait a week or two to get up and running. But I would think a conglomerate and a giant as big as Xfinity, they'll have that figured out as soon as possible, if not hell at 11:59 on September 30th if they have to, in order to make sure it's there for the debut on October 1st.
Yeah, and we'll have to see what the sort of the tone of the network is. I have a feeling it's going to be somewhat similar to what we saw with NBC Sportsnet. Got a lot of the same personalities moving over there. Did enjoy Jim Corneliuson in the little ad they had there, just getting unwrapped in the living room, singing the end of the anthem there. Man, I'm so excited for hockey to be back. I really hope that it's on my TV, and we don't have to jump through hoops to watch the Chicago Blackhawks this year. Ron, it would really say, I know we've got a couple of events that we're going to try and get together and watch some of these games early on in the season. And I would hate for it to be ruined by, two arguing, billionaire companies going back and forth at each other, trying to save a little money here and there. Let the people have their hockey, Ron. That's what I'm saying. Let the people have their hockey. That's what I want.
I fully support your sentiment there, Tony. I will also be disappointed if hockey is not directly on my television when it debuts on the 1st. Tony, this perfectly segues us into our next bullet here, and that is the preseason slate. So because of CHSN not debuting until October 1st, the first 3 Blackhawks games will not be traditionally broadcasted. The first game, because it is a home game at the United Center, will be available on Blackhawks.com. So be sure to head over there. And just at the end of the day, right, go watch it there. You're going to want to watch it. They play the Red Wings, Detroit.
And there's no Chris Velsters anymore.
There is not. That is another exciting
Could be another change.
We'll get to see. It will. It'll be good to see that. But so that will be available on September 25th, actually a week from today as we're recording this. And then as it moves forward, the games on the 27th and 28th will not be televised. However, they will be covered on WGN radio. So do head over and listen to John and Troy. Again, it's one of the best experiences on radio you're going to get. So you can't be too mad about it at the end of the day. But then again, they will have it where CHSN will cover the game on October 1st, and it will cover the final 2 games. I believe that is the 4th and the 5th, if I remember correctly, are the final 2 preseason games that will be broadcast on CHSN. So that's how the preseason will shake out. And then again, as we noted a little bit before, October 8th in Utah on ESPN at 9 o'clock Central Time will be the opener for the season. And then you and I will be at the home opener, Tone, on October 17th when they take on Macklin Celebrini and the San Jose Sharks at the United Center. That's a Thursday night game to get the season at the UC started. Tone, do you have any feathers to ruffle before we continue to wind this thing down?
Dude, I don't have many feathers to ruffle right now. It's too early in the season to be ruffling feathers for me. If there's one, I guess I sort of just ruffled it right now. Jerry Reinsdorf, get this network on my television screen October 1st, please. That's about it. I don't have any other feathers to ruffle. We'll let the hockey start, and then I'm sure I'll have plenty of feathers to ruffle. How about you?
I do have a few feathers to ruffle. I always
Let's
have
go.
feathers to ruffle because it's fun to piss people off. If the youngsters don't make the roster, don't make a stink. Because I've already seen it all over Blackhawks socials. And
I'm going to make a stink, man, just for you.
The fan base, I've seen a lot of people. Everybody's hyping up that Nazar is going to make the team right out of camp and all this. If they go to Rockford, it's not because they suck. It's not because they're not a good hockey player that's not going to be a part of the future. It's because at the moment, for them to properly develop, it's better for Frank Nazar to go down to Rockford and play 20 minutes a night than it is for him to play 10 minutes at the NHL level. And if you don't like it, tough shit. Go watch a Rockford game. AHL TV, which is on a new platform, I believe, this year. It's a new, streaming capability, is readily available, and it's very affordable. You can watch every single game, no matter what. Every AHL game, period. You can watch every game around the league. You can watch the Wolves. You can watch any team you want. You can even scout other teams if you so choose. Don't make a stink if the youngsters go to Rockford. They're doing it because they don't want to do what Stan Bowman did, and that was constantly rush prospects to the NHL, only for them to fizzle out and never fully reach their ceiling. Let's actually get some good hockey out of some of their draft picks for once. It would be lovely. It'd be a nice change of pace. So I'm not mad if they go to Rockford, and I believe the people should not be either. As you mentioned, Tone, a little too early to distribute the salt shaker just yet. But stick taps, Tony. I think you and I collectively share a stick tap here, but I'll let you go ahead and take the floor.
Well, I'll give you the one that you've got. I'm going to give a quick stick tap to Kyle Davidson and Luke Richardson for making Nick Foligno the captain of this team. I think that was the right decision. I know I already went pretty long-winded on that, but if I do have the first stick tap, that's for the coaching staff and making the right decision with the captaincy the captain vacancy. And I'm glad that we can put that storyline to rest. The second one, we both share this, Ron. I'll let you take it and we can give some thoughts on it.
Yeah, big stick taps to a friend of the program. We can legitimately, I think, call him a friend of the program. Mr. Charlie Remuliotis. He is sticking around, not in the Blackhawks correspondent role that he was with at NBC Sports Chicago, but now is replacing Joe Brand, who has moved on. And I loved Joe Brand, so very excited for him. Also, this is news that we haven't spoken about yet. Congratulations to him on getting the Pittsburgh radio job. I think that's awesome for Joe Brand. I think he's going to do great. I think the Penguins fans are going to love him. I enjoyed listening to him in Chicago as a part of the WGN radio broadcasts and filling in for John Weideman as he needed to at certain points in the season. We get to hear Charlie on the pre and post shows now as the host on WGN radio. And I think that's pretty awesome to still have Charlie Remuliotis as a part of the Blackhawks family. Because I truly believe at this point, he is synonymous with Blackhawks hockey just because of the impact he's made with NBC Sports Chicago. Very excited that he will be still a part of the game day experience as a Blackhawks fan and really as somebody who admires him as a friend and just as a professional that he is. Super excited to play the Where's Waldo with Charlie and his luscious hair. But instead of in the press box, this time it'll be up in the radio booth.
Yeah, I love this move. Obviously, it was sort of concerning to see his name left off the list of CHN new employees, so to speak. I was a little bit worried that we were going to lose Charlie, and then the news of Joe Brand leaving sort of opened up a perfect vacancy, I think, for Charlie Remuliotis. He's, been on pre and post on TV. He's got some radio experience, and it sort of allows him to now take the reins into his own show with pre and post on radio. I know that's not, the same as being on CHSN with Pat Boyle. I think that those two had a good thing going over at NBC Sports Chicago. I'm going to miss that a little bit, but Charlie's going to have the ability to, sort of make this his own. And I love that for him. He's a good dude. We've interacted a couple of times on some various different golf courses that I've found him on. Ron, I know you've run into him a couple places as well. We're big fans of Mr. Meliodas here on Four Feathers podcast. We're very happy that he landed this awesome role that I think is going to be, just another familiar voice within, Blackhawks land to be there for you on game day right before John and Troy take it away. And we all know how great they are at their craft as well. I think that the radio team is absolutely stacked, just as strong as it ever has been, Ron. So excellent stick tap call out there. Happy for Mr. Meliodas.
Indeed, I am as well. This probably should have been in the Ruffle Some Feathers conversation.
I don't even want to see this. This is heinous.
Ruffling some feathers. He says, breaking news, Jerry and the Ricketts are buying the Blackhawks to provide continued pain to the Chicago market. Thankfully, Danny and the Words family own them and keep them away from everybody else. Tony, a little bit of what's on tap next. Well, hockey is back, as we noted. Tomorrow opens training camp on Thursday, September 19th. And the first preseason game is Wednesday, September 25th against good old Detroit Sucks. Again, that is on Blackhawks.com is where you will find that broadcast. That will be the only one of the first three televised. The last two on the road will be only radio broadcasts. It's kind of consistent with preseasons of old, if we're being honest. A lot of the times the away games are not broadcasted on television for preseason. They're usually radio only anyway, so not a whole lot of difference there. It'll be good because at least when they do have it on TV, among those games that will be included is the one up in Fiserv Forum up in Milwaukee, which is obviously a huge preseason game for the Blackhawks because, again, Milwaukee does not have a hockey team. So largely most people up in that market are Blackhawks fans. So that one will surely do well. And again, of course, it's against the Wild. So you get the two teams that is right in between there with the state of Wisconsin. But Tony, in addition to what's on tap next, another note that we at the Four Feathers podcast have not talked about yet because we've been in our summer slumber, as we like to call it. And largely for all of us, that means baseball season because of our coverage responsibilities here at On Tap Sportsnet. But I do want to talk about the tragedy that struck the hockey world and the loss of Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau. And just a senseless act of stupidity because people think it's okay to get behind the wheel when you're drunk and drive. I was ironically at a wedding myself when the news broke. So hearing that, it was the night before their sister's wedding was supposed to happen is truly heartbreaking. I think the outpouring of love from not only the Columbus Blue Jackets fan base, but also the Calgary Flames fan base, I think was awesome. I think it really moved a lot of people and it properly showed the impact that the Gaudreaus both had on the world of hockey and on the sport. It doesn't feel real. Like I as a fan, it's hard to comprehend that. And I think it'll really sink in on opening night when Columbus inevitably has a huge honoring for Johnny and Matthew. And they're already announced they're wearing stickers on the helmets for the whole season in honor of those two. But just the last thing you expect to be discussing on a hockey podcast is the tragic death of two young men who have barely lived their lives and taken in a senseless act of stupidity, really at the end of the day. So just bringing that to light here from the Four Feathers standpoint, and truly thoughts are with the Gaudreau family, even though we are a few weeks removed from the event. Obviously time tries to heal all wounds, but sometimes even time is not enough. And it'll surely be I think it'll really shake the hockey world again once the regular season kicks off and it's kind of reminded in front of everybody once again at the loss of those two young men. So hopefully their families are getting by as well as they humanly can in an instance like this. And I think from the Four Feathers podcast, we were thinking about them and we wish them nothing but the best. And our thoughts and our prayers are with them in just a horrible incident. And again, he was never a Blackhawk, but he was surely a lot of fun to watch. And Johnny Gaudreau was a hell of a hockey player and an even better person. So rough loss for the hockey world. And, that'll be something that we constantly think about. I think we would feel the same way if it was a Blackhawks player. The United Center would be decorated from head to toe with tributes to somebody like that and who's had a huge impact on the sport. So wanted to bring some light to that before we continue to wrap things up here, Tony. But I do want to turn it over to you for any final thoughts before we go ahead and close down the show and wish everybody a farewell because training camp's here.
Yeah, Ron, I think that was well said on the whole Johnny Gaudreau situation. I don't have too much to add. I think you took care of most of that. Just terrible tragedy. I will add one thing, man. It's crazy that when it happens to someone who's a public figure, I think it captures more attention because the headlines scream louder. There's more people who are interested in what that person is doing. That's whether it's a professional athlete, celebrity, public figure, but stuff like this happens every single day. And it's really sad that, a lot of people are affected and impacted by something like this. It's terrible. When I heard that, his wife was pregnant, as a father, that one really, that one hit me. So I think that was wonderful. You brought this up. Thank you for throwing that up here into our rundown, Ron. I think that was important. I know we didn't get a chance to discuss that, but again, thoughts and prayers out to the Gaudreau family and everybody who was affected by that and impacted. Final thoughts for the Chicago Blackhawks. I know this is a tough segue, Ron. You set me up with a real tough segue. Final thoughts for the Blackhawks. This is going to be a fun year. It's really going to be a fun year. I'm excited for this. I don't know if I've been as excited for a hockey season in a while. And obviously last year had the Bedard hype. We actually spent some money in free agency. There's a bunch of new faces that are going to be on the ice for this team. Tomorrow, man, you're going to load up that phone screen and you're going to see guys skating all over the ice and the team together for the first time. You can grab yourself a free ticket and head on down and watch these guys practice training camp. If you really wanted to, I mean, it's a great day. It's not quite opening day yet, but hockey is back in our lives. We're back on Four Feathers. This is season 6, Ron, of Four Feathers podcast. It's incredible what a journey this has been. I want to thank everybody who's listened to this show for the first 5 seasons. Welcome to season 6. We're going to try and bring you more content this year. I know Ron and I have worked pretty hard over the off season with some chatting with ourselves and Johnny and everybody involved in Four Feathers podcast. We want to be here more this year for the listeners and bring some different types of content. Maybe we'll get some watch alongs together, Ron. We're going to see what we can do to bring more to you. So please hop on board, join us throughout the rest of the 2024-2025 Blackhawks season. It's going to be tons of fun. We've got a Winter Classic that we're going to be able to attend here about midway through the season in end of December for this edition. There's going to be plenty of in-arena content from Ronald and myself and Johnny as well. So it's going to be a fun year, Ron. I'm really excited for it. I'm not ready to put out my season predictions yet. I think we'll get a full panel for that, but I just definitely think it's going to be a fun year to be a Blackhawks fan. Ron, your final thoughts.
I echo that as well, Tony. This is probably the first season in a long time that I've been truly excited for Blackhawks hockey. And again, I think there's a level of expectation that all of us have, and it might not be the level of expectation that we hope that this team would be at in the current situation, but in the nature of
as long as I don't have to watch a team break a world record for losing, I think I'm going to be better off in winter.
Yeah, well, you've had a rough summer, Tone, and we've had rough summers for very different reasons, but nonetheless, I I am excited to see what they do. Again, a team that will be a better product than a year ago on the ice. It should be more exciting for everybody involved. And I think, Tony, the reason I'm the most excited with this season, probably more since probably maybe 2017. I mean, it's been a while, I think, since I've felt this excited about a Blackhawks season starting. And that is because this is the ascent, right? They hit bottom for a couple of seasons there, and we knew that as a part of this rebuild. This is the first season that's truly a part of the ascent now on the way up. And I think that's what makes it most exciting. And it might just be at the initial curve. We're not quite all the way up there, up the mountain just yet. But even starting that trek up is certainly going to be an exciting feat to watch. And who knows? They certainly could blow away expectation. But nonetheless, I think just watching Connor Bedard take another step forward in his development and growth as a 19-year-old player, the level of faces that they brought in to complement him now in that forward group, some familiar faces as well, like guys like Teuvo Teravainen, who I think will be a welcomed addition back to Chicago. I think a lot of people missed him from his time in Carolina. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm right there with you, Tone. We want to bring as much content as humanly possible. You and I will be at the United Center quite a bit as well this season. So surely that'll be something that we try to incorporate when it comes to content and all things Blackhawks. I'm very, very pumped for this season and more so than ever as well, too. This New Year's Eve is going to be cool. I'm very, very excited about the Winter Classic this year. And you and I are literally sitting right next to each other. It worked out quite well. That's going to be a load of fun to be at Wrigley, which obviously for me is a lot more personal than it is for you. But just it's going to be an electric venue. It's going to be an electric atmosphere. I hope it snows because last year we got snow on New Year's Eve for the Chicago Bears game that took place on New Year's Eve. I'm hoping Mother Nature does its thing again and gives us snow for a Blackhawks Blues Winter Classic, because I think that would be maybe one of the most poetic things you can physically have for an event like that at the turn of a new year. So
I would love
very, very excited as well, man.
50 degrees, nice.
Yeah, so the ice melts and they can't play like they did at Lake Tahoe.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't mind some snow. It'd be picturesque. It'd be nice to see that. But you get it in Wrigley Field again for the second time, and that's how way she goes.
Yeah, well, it's been almost 15 years. It's been a long time. Actually, it has been 15 years. It was 2009. So
that's crazy to think that is
that far removed already.
Yeah, we are that far removed.
It's nuts. It's nuts. And Wrigley looks different this time. So I think that's part of the cool thing, all the renovations that they did to, keep Wrigley looking like Wrigley, but still bringing an old ballpark into the modern world. That'll be really cool for that event. So very, very much looking forward to that as well. Well, Tony, just as we always remind everybody, again, be sure to check out ontapsportsnet.com as well as OnTap Sportsnet on the socials. Again, follow us over on the YouTube, like, subscribe, hit the bell button for the OnTap Sportsnet channel. You know when all of our great shows go live, including us here at the Four Feathers Podcast. Be sure to follow at Four Feathers Pod on the socials as well. Johnny, you, myself, but mostly Johnny does a great job running the account, putting out great content and great fun all season long. So be sure to follow along there. In addition to that, be sure to follow all of our other great coverage as well. Bears and Bulls are going to be coming up here as a part of the fall sports slate with the Blackhawks. Our baseball teams over at Cubs and Sox on Tap, respectively, are coming to a close, but be sure to follow those shows throughout the offseason as well for all the off-season narratives and highlights and storylines as we wind into a new year and as we wind through the fall sports and winter sports seasons. OnTapSportsNet.com, at OnTapSportsNet on the socials, the OnTap Sports Network. Go and check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Tony, always a pleasure talking Blackhawks hockey with you. We're back. It's season 6 already of the Four Feathers Podcast. I still remember our introductory shows back in 2018. And I think, this could be one of the more fun years that we've had as a part of the Four Feathers Podcast. And I'm very much looking forward to it with you and Johnny, as well as all the other contributors that we have here as part of the Blackhawks and Four Feathers coverage, Pat Comiskey and others as well. It's going to be a great trek. And Tony, what do you say? Let's go Hawks.
Let's go Hawks.